So what do humility and curiosity have to do with selling in the restoration industry or any other service vertical for that matter? Well, for me, the answer to that question goes back to my mid-20s. I was a sales rep for Cintas, uniform and laundry services. So I was selling 3 and 5 year service contracts. It was a cutthroat business. Many of you maybe have Cintas for your uniforms, but it was an incredible experience early in my career because of the sales training that Cintas offers. So Cintas has a sales methodology called RBS, or requirements-based selling. And the reason this was so transformational is it was a totally different way of selling than I'd been previously taught. So I'd been taught kind of features and benefits, where you have your folder and you've got the company information, founded in 1949. We have locations. Look at the scatter map. All these are brute force. Look how big we are. We're the number 3 in the nation for X. Here's our products and why they're so much better than our competitors' products, etc. Right? It was a charisma sell. I'd go through the information and then I would close them on enthusiasm and my own kind of personal persuasion, right? They liked me and I got them enthusiastic about the product. It's fine. But when I came to Cintas, they didn't do any of that. Their whole process was rooted in curiosity, asking curious questions about the existing vendor and their experience with them and listening for pain points, frustration, unmet needs, etc. And so one quick example of how I do this is I'd sit down and go say into an auto shop where they buy uniforms. I sit down with the owner and I say, hey, before we get too deep in conversation, do you have your most recent invoice? Okay, when was your last delivery? Oh, this morning. Awesome. And I'd say, hey, could you mind if we just go walk through the shop? And I'd take that invoice and my notepad and we go walk over to where the uniforms are delivered. And I would look at the invoice. I'd say, hey, okay, so you guys are supposed to receive, looks like you got billed for 8 sets of uniforms. And then I'd look up at the hanging area and I'd see 4 and I'd say, why'd they only leave you 4? And then the owner would turn to Bill, shop foreman, and be like, Bill, why do we only have 4 uniforms? We're supposed to have 8. He's like, oh yeah, it's been that way forever. I don't know what's going on. The driver had some explanation for it. We just kind of make do. Well, I take out my notepad and I'm writing that. And then I continue with that discovery process until I've got a list of pain points. And then by the time I go sit down with that owner, I review those pain points. They're already frothy with frustration and anger about their existing vendor. And so all I do is really non-salesy. I just go through and I speak to each one of these pain points and I explain either the process, the procedure, or the unique product that we have to address that pain point specifically. I'm not pulling out a big folder with sales slicks of all the different things we do, document preservation, restoration, or whatever. I'm purely focusing on the pain that I have already found with them. I didn't have to trump anything up. And honestly, one of the values at Cintas was if there's no pain, there's no prospect. Move on. Revisit them 3 or 6 months from then and see how things are going. But there's no pain, there's no prospect. And I love that. And so by the time I got together and I presented just these tit for tat solutions to the pain they had, all I had to do was sit back and say, listen, I understand it's frustrating to discover all this, but I've showed you how we can handle these things for you. What do you want to do? That was kind of my sales close. So how does this relate to restoration? What's the takeaway? Well, first, I think it's important we point out that largely what our industry's been doing for selling all these years has been features and benefits selling, right? We've had fun, exuberant, sales reps that we send into agent offices and property management offices and whatever, handing out swag, handing out trifolds that all say the same thing, talking about our cool app so you can track the status of your customer's claim and how many branch offices we have around the country, how big and awesome we are. So what does it look like for us to transition to more of a humility and curiosity model? Well, let's talk about property management. Because I don't know many clients who don't want to be the primary EMS provider for a property management portfolio, okay? So if I go to a portfolio manager, I meet them at a multifamily housing event or something like that, and we get into a conversation, here's what humility and curiosity sounds like. Hey, so listen, how long have you been in this business? 8 years? Okay, all right. So you know what we do. What's your experience been though with our industry? Like, when was the last damage event you had to deal with at one of your properties? Okay. Who'd you work with on that? Okay, well, how'd it go? You don't need to give me all the gory details, right? You don't even need to tell me the company's name if you don't want to, but just what was your last experience on your damage event? Okay. A lot of times when I ask that first curious question, what's your experience with our industry, or tell me about your last damage event, the person will just puke out vitriol, frustration, angst, like, man, your industry is a mess. Now, when people go negative, here's where the humility comes in. My knee-jerk response was always, and it has to be, listen, it's a tough industry. And we're not perfect either. But what was it about their people or their process that made it the hardest for you and your team, or maybe your owner client? Now, I'm forcing them out of the angst, the negative association with the industry. I'm asking them to spotlight specifically, like, what were the pain points? Because then, instead of me saying, oh yeah, we don't do that, or we're way better, oh yeah, those guys suck, or, and I'm sure those of you watching this don't do that, right? But I don't have to go negative, because instead I can say, well, listen, like I said, we're not perfect, but here's the system, or here's the procedure, or here's the process that we use to try to make sure that that thing doesn't ever happen again. I don't have to sell it. They're like, oh, well, that's cool. And then my only closing line, sometimes we have to ask for the order, right? But after I've asked them curious questions about their experience, and they've offered up specific things about people or process with the past company they worked with, and then I can speak to the systems or procedures or people that we have in place to handle that specific pain, then it's very natural for me to say, listen, what would you need to see from me or know about us to feel comfortable giving us maybe a shot at your next job? I'd love to show you this in action. That's humility and curiosity. So what does it look like when we go into an agent office? When we go into an agent office, rather than the smiles and candy approach, there's nothing wrong with filling candy jars, but rather than the typical, have you heard how great we are and all the cool things about us, and have I showed you our app, no, instead, hey, listen, you already know. I mean, we're a restoration company. Undoubtedly, you've had 15 of them walk through your door already this month. What's your experience been? What have you heard from your policyholders about our industry? And 9 times out of 10, people have negative things to say. And again, my process is the same. Well, listen, humility. It's a tough industry. It's a lot of moving parts. It's really complex. There's a lot of things that can break in the process. We're not perfect either, but what specifically about their people or their process did you hear about such and such company that you just mentioned? Like, what was it specifically that the customer talked about that made it really hard? Oh, okay, communication. It was like pulling teeth to ever get an update on where's the project at? Why haven't we seen anybody for 4 days? Right? Oh, hey, you know what? Listen, that's a common problem in the industry, because timelines change and things happen. But here's the system we have in our company. We have what we call a 24-hour job update that all of our project managers use. Whether or not there's been a material update on the project, we still send out the 24-hour updates so that you, as the agent, person who sent this customer to us, and the customer knows that there's nothing happening right now because we're waiting on this thing that's going to happen Friday. And then after that, we have all these other things that are going to start to fall into place. So that's the system we use to try to make sure that people are never frustrated. We just send them an update, even if it's a no new information update. We still do it because of what you're talking about. People get really frustrated and nervous when they don't know what's going on. Now, sometimes when this curiosity and humility thing, we tease out people that are really happy with their existing vendors. And that's okay too. I'm not afraid of that, right? Because I'm going to ask the same question. Oh, okay, you've always used ServPro, or you've always used BMS CAD or Belfor or whomever, and you guys have had good experience with them. That's awesome. What about their people or their process do you guys really like? And if they get all fishy, like, why are you asking me this? I'd say, well, honestly, I'm curious, because whatever you tell me, if you like what they do, I'm going to take it back to my team. And if it's something we can implement, everybody wins, right? Because I'd love for it to be a backup for you if Belfor, BMS, ATI is maxed out during the next storm. I'd love to be a resource for you. So, what was it about their people or process that made it easier? right? Are you seeing humility, curiosity, right? Now, here's also where this can play into retention with customers. How many times do your team, your department managers or your salespeople come back in and say, hey, the Johnsons or the such and such XYZ corporation was so happy with the job we just finished last week? Like, they like us. Guys, we're in. They were so happy with the work. What does that mean? What does it mean when a customer says, oh, we really like you, or we're really happy with the work? What does that tell us? What kind of information is that? It's no information at all. So one of the things that we coach our clients to do, and we found tremendous success with, is making those follow-up calls after a job and saying, hey, listen, by the way, first of all, thank you for that, satisfaction survey. I'm glad you guys had a really good experience. Listen, do you mind if I dig into that a little bit? What about our people or our process really made it better, or did you appreciate? Would you mind just sharing 2 or 3 things that you notice? This is a fantastic thing for a GM, an owner, a department manager to do. Come in with that authority, right? You're giving your time to the client. There's goodwill value in that. But then the real power is in what they say. Because then you can take that information, what they said, listen for the adjectives they use when they describe their team or that experience or the project manager that they really loved and why and what that person did. And it gives you the opportunity to feed that back to your team, right? Hey guys, it's not what we say about ourselves that's important. It's what the customer says. You have to hear what XYZ Corp just said about that job we completed last week, or what the Johnson said about that fire job that we just completed. You should hear what they have to say. And now all of a sudden, those adjectives, right, those comments become points of pride in the team. And they reinforce what we're selling and what we're delivering to both your service side and your salespeople, right? Humility and curiosity, right? It has its place in every single area of the business.